And thank you everybody for coming on this kind of awkward week, a weird, not quite a bank holiday Friday thing that's going to be coming ahead of us. Thank you all for coming. So I'm going to try and be very brief. I just wanted to give you a little bit of the context for our colleagues coming from abroad, and for everybody, I suppose, if you haven't heard about the project that I'm involved in, and also some of the work we do in ILAS around trying to better connect research to policy. I'll just explain that for you, and then I'm more than happy just to hand over to the people who are much more interesting than me. So very quickly, supporting science impacting policy is a new initiative we got funding from Enlight Plus. So it's kind of seed funding to do some collaboration work to start to build collaborations. So we see this as the start of a relationship across Enlight universities, looking at how we work in this space across our different universities to try and support our researchers to connect better with policy, to be more effective in their communication with policy, and to hopefully help the next generation of researchers kind of do the work better, more effectively, more efficiently. So I'll let Emily and Daniel talk about their work in a few minutes in Ghent and in Comenius. But I just thought I'd just give you a little bit of context, I suppose, and like why we do this work and why it's so important. And I think as researchers, we're always looking to the betterment of society. And one clear path to this is through informing policy to have more effective, to have policy based on the best available evidence at any one time. So that makes perfect sense to all of us here, but unfortunately it's not always done. I used this slide recently as well, just to kind of explain that messy world of policy making that researchers try and engage with and try and find their way into. This came from the recent released policy handbook. So this was brought out by the Department of the Taoiseach, so that's our Prime Minister's office, and by the Government of Ireland to try and help policymakers to more effectively develop policies, and once again based on the best available evidence. Now this can seem quite intimidating, and on a bad day it seems very intimidating to me, but I think there's a positive way to look at this, that researchers have a lot of potential windows into which that they can inform and engage with policymakers throughout all these different stages of policy development and these types of things. And just to say as well, I think this was a really nice example, the policy handbook, of the policy side trying to be a bit more transparent, trying to open up the doors a little bit to show how they do their work, and the challenges they face. So I just wanted this is the context piece. This is the stuff that's been happening over the last maybe 5 to 7 years in the Irish research landscape and in the broader EU landscape to try and strengthen research policy connections and engagement. I should have up here as well the recent Research Ireland strategy that was just launched, that has a massive focus on research policy interaction and engagement. They have KPIs around policy engagement for researchers. Some really concrete pieces there around trying to get researchers into departments, trying to get departments to do more work with researchers. So that's a really good step. And there's been lots of really good steps. And of course, I have to plug our white paper that Ian mentioned earlier. So this was, and just to give you a little context on the science advocacy piece, and why we did that. So this was set up through the EP team in Curum that we worked on, and we were looking at this idea of science advocacy. And our first issue there was terminology. And I think, as we might talk about it today, I think that's one of the big issues is around language and terminology. Between researchers and policymakers, and even with researchers in general across disciplines, and trying to agree on terminology. I'm currently undertaking my study, and it's a constant back and forth. Are we talking about the same thing? For us, we were talking about science advocacy as active support for science, where we're engaging with policy audiences to inform, support, influence policy decision making. But what we were really trying to focus on with our research community is to not overburden them, to understand this as science communication in another form in many ways, but also that it's very related to engage research. And that's something that I'm passionate about, is engage research. Just to give you an idea of the type of stuff we've been doing with Curum in the science advocacy training over the last few years, we've done numerous events, and I think lots of people here in the room have been involved in ones through the years, where we've brought in researchers to talk about those practical experiences and the work they do. We had one just 2 weeks ago, looking at writing policy briefs and how to understand your policy audiences. So that's been lovely to do. I would highlight as well this one in the middle here, because this was the first time that we had ILAS and Curum researchers together for a half-day seminar, and it was looking at the potential for PPI, so that's public and patient involvement in research, the potential for that to strengthen policy messages. And that was a really nice day, and that was one of the seeds really that came around to our own project and a lot of the work we do. And the other thing I wanted to mention, we had Sarah Chater here in November. So Sarah is the co-chair for the UPenn, which is the UK's policy engagement network, and they work very closely with the government and with all the universities across the UK. And just the point that Sarah made was, and it was the one that stuck with me. She talked about if she could, in an ideal world, every researcher would have a day a week to talk and to have cups of tea and coffee, and with policymakers, but also with each other. And I think that's what we're trying to do today, is just give ourselves a little time to sit back and reflect and to talk across disciplines and to see, well, where are we? What are the common challenges we face? What are the differences? Where could we maybe help each other out a little bit more? So just to give you a background on the Engage Research for Policy Impact. So this is it's a Research Ireland funded project. There's, I think it's 6 projects going on all at the same time, looking at various aspects of strengthening research to policy communication, engagement, the ecosystem, it's sometimes called. Our one is very much, some are focused on the kind of bigger picture things, systems level stuff. We're very much focused on individual researchers. So how do you, as one person, go about trying to make sure that your work gets in the hands of the people who need to hear it? So we're in the process of that. This is our research team. We're delighted to have Dr. Fergal Lynch as part of our research team, who was a former civil servant himself, Secretary General. So he worked very closely with researchers through the years, and he's been a great help for us in guiding our project. Once again, very quickly, because most people here will have heard it, these are some of our focus areas for our research, which is ongoing at the moment. We're looking, as I said, at that engaged research space, and the potential for that to increase the efficacy of policy engagement. We're looking, as I said, at commonalities and differences across the career life cycle, across disciplines. So this is another example of it today, looking at what are the differences, what are the common pieces across our disciplinary areas. And then universities, I think this is a lovely example with Ghent and with Comenius, that we're looking to see, well, how do things change across universities? And then really it's about just supporting that next generation of researchers. And obviously part of that is, how do we incentivize this type of work more? Because it isn't being incentivized as much as it should be, I think, at present. Coming back to why we're looking at engaged research, just to give you another example, this is from that policy handbook I mentioned, and they have this 3 pillars and 5 Ds process for policy making. And at the launch, it really stuck with me when they talked about legitimacy, data and evidence, and feasibility and implementation as these 3 pillars that are needed for effective policy development. I really was, engaged research does all of that. It really does inform better data and evidence, quite obviously. Legitimacy by bringing in public audiences, communities, policymakers into the research process, and that feasibility and implementation by being more real world relevant, I suppose, is maybe how I put it. Now I'm flying through this. This is my last slide. Just to give you an idea where we are, so you can see it, and you might be hearing from me over the next while. We've pretty much completed our work package 1 of interviews. I'm still chasing a few stragglers, of course, as always is the way. We're in the process of analysing this. Then we'll be going on to a survey of researchers to kind of do some sense checking and really pick out those the kind of interesting pieces which are floating around my head at the moment, because I had an interview this morning about it. But to see then if this does make sense to researchers in different areas, and to what extent. And then that final piece of the puzzle for us will be bringing this to the other side, if we think of it as a two-sided coin, and obviously it isn't, but bringing it to the other people that are impacted by policy and have an impact on policy development, and really getting their opinions and their perspectives on the research we're doing.